You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
On the point of that night, a man's life is at stake.
I'm just saying it's possible.
And I say it's not possible. I want you to watch this because I don't want to have to do it again. I'll make myself about 6 or 7 inches shorter, okay?
It's about right, maybe a little more.
Okay, a little more.
Down in Texas, where I come from, we just go out and get a man and string him up.
That's right. I say stretch him. Tain't just a rustler we're after. It's a murderer.
If you got any doubts, Tedley, I say let's call off this party. Take him back to judge like Davies wants.
This is only slightly any of your business, my friend. Remember that?
I knew more than anything that I wanted to play in a picture made from this story. Well, I was lucky enough to do so. And while it's not ethical for an actor to talk about a picture he's in public that is, I'm going to do it anyway.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss 2 films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we'll be sticking around with the Westerns and talking dirty men of the law, so join that sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for 4.5 years. So there's like 110 plus bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series, which we've been doing a lot recently, where we talk about new release genre films, which we just dropped a big one on David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future and, a couple other big heavy hitters. So again, if that interests you at all, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we have the patrons to give their shout outs here today. We have Valen Oteda, we have Chad O'Neill, we have Brady Childs, we have Hamish Bruce, Flower, Jealous Cactus, Nicole Stewart, David, James McDermott, John Mulholland, John Hampus Bistrom, witty username, Kyle Papayano, Sam Grass, Ross Warner, Nate James, Joshua Fodor, and Samantha. So thanks to all of you folks. Hope you are all enjoying those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support.
Yeah,
that's the one plug for the week. The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I can see the stats. I see that you are. I see you right now listening on those platforms. Scroll down to the very bottom and give us a good old rating and review down there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the very last plug for the week, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that basically put on anything that you can think of. And you guys have thought of a lot of things: notebooks, hoodies, pillows, just a poster, whatever you can think of. You can probably get the Sleazoids logo on it. That link is in the description, as well as at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us, and we would have had special guest Noah Colwin on from the Blowback podcast to discuss 2 underseen 80s thrillers that apply some real-world ugly statecraft and foreign policy examinations into their fun genre thrills. We talked about one, The Whistleblower from 1986, starring Michael Caine, which was kind of a John le Carré-esque TV film that was cool to talk about, especially Caine's performance. And we paired that with The Mighty Quinn from 1989, starring Denzel Washington as a Caribbean island sheriff named after the Bob Dylan song. And yes, he does cover the Bob Dylan song in the film. He does a nice little reggae cover of it. It's wonderful.
It's great. And he's got all the swagger and charisma that we know and love him for.
1989. Cool. Yeah, it came out in between his Oscar-nominated performances, so most people don't really talk about it, but it totally predates his more fun, thrillery side he would get into in the 90s and early 2000s, especially with Tony Scott. So anyone who likes those films, recommend checking out The Mighty Quinn, very underseen. And then last week, over for the bonus patrons, for your guys' exclusive episode, we did a massive episode on some heavy hitters. We talked about some self-reflexive thrillers that take sort of Hitchcock voyeurism and 70s paranoia into the 80s and get a little pervy and lurid with it, and little sort of meta with the idea of American filmmakers caught in murder conspiracies. We talked about Brian De Palma's Blowout from 1981, his doomed romance masterpiece on artifice and illusion and trying to reconstruct the truth literally using the filmmaking process. And we paired that with 1984's Special Effects, directed by Larry Cohen, which is Larry Cohen's attempt at making a vulgar Brian De Palma-esque film, more akin to probably De Palma in like Body Double or Dress to Kill mode or something, a little bit sleazier in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just
very fun
love
to talk about.
The tacky sets, and it turns into like kind of this surreal meta thing that is very entertaining and gets pretty kind of oddly funny, but very dark at the same time.
Yeah, it was the darkest magic of the movies double feature ever, because in special effects, it's Eric Bogosian playing the director who is a serial killer trying to adapt his own killings into a film, and also trying to use that film as like a framing device. So very strange film, fun to talk about. Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That was last week's bonus episode. But moving on to this week, we have a very special returning guest joining us. He is a hip hop and music journalist for Rolling Stone, GQ, Pitchfork, and many other places. And also he is a fellow film bro who has been on this show before. That is Jayson Buford. Jayson, how you doing?
Hello. Love the considering me a fellow film bro. We love to see it. Electric.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, after last time we talked to you, we had a crazy talk where we did blaxploitation satires with Rudy Ray Moore's Petey Wheatstraw, The Devil's Son-in-Law, and Spike Lee's Bamboozled, and we got a lot of positive feedback on that. So as far as I'm concerned, you have been deputized.
That's right.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Love to be here.
Welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in talking about two really great movies. So.
Yeah. I mean, as it goes, we have the guests bring the double feature with them this week. So, Jayson, what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about 12 Angry Men, Sidney Lumet's 1957 classic, and we're talking about the Oxbow Incident, 1943 William Wellman classic.
Hell yeah. Yeah, because you came to me and you were like, I really want to talk about 12 Angry Men. And I was like, interesting. Okay, I'd be down to do that. But
I had seen it. I think I approached you a few months ago. I had just seen it a few days ago, and I was like, "Damn, this movie fucking rocks!" I was like, "I gotta talk about it somewhere." Yeah, you know what I mean. And usually I'll just DM Josh, be like, "Yo, I just saw this. Like, how does it fit into Sleazoids or whatever?" So yeah. So then we started kind of coming up with some pairings, and it happened just from the magic of always be watching movies. I happened to watch something that really reminded me of 12 Angry Men, which was this film, The Oxbow Incident, and predates it by almost a full decade and a half, pretty much. And so I was like, well, I was just thinking about 12 Angry Men recently, so let's talk about these two, because both are very stripped down, very tightly directed examinations of, you have like the masculine sort of social pressure towards violence, especially in Oxbow Incident, where it's it's a little bit more like they actually want to do the violence with their own hands. But you also get the procedure of kind of like sort of like mob and frontier justice, and then you also get all sort of developed into these very stirring and effective morality plays, essentially, about the death penalty. And they hit you pretty hard while also being pretty spare and pretty simple at the same time. Like it's very impressive. Yeah, I felt that way as well, and I also think it has to do with this level of mob justice, if you will, or justice lack thereof, rather. This like mob mentality, as you talked about, of violence and. Environment as well, right? 12 Angry Men takes place notoriously in a room, and it's hot as hell, and
Yep.
emotions are flying, and so it's all crazy. And I think Oxbow incident is in the small town. It starts in the saloon. It's like, you know what I mean. So I think too, it's also talking about setting and how those things aid to this level of masculinity and violent pressure, if you will.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm excited to get into it. So let's start off here. Let's start with 12 Angry Men.
Shut up. You're a sadist. 12 men turned into 12 clawing animals. Kill them all. Kill them.
All right, we are talking 12 Angry Men, the 1957 American courtroom drama film directed by Sidney Lumet and adapted from the 1954 teleplay of the same name by one Reginald Rose, which would eventually be turned into a stage production, which is why most people, some people commonly mistake this film as an adaptation of a play, but it is not. It was actually turned into a play after. It was actually a TV. I don't know if I guess you call it. It is called a teleplay. So I guess it was kind of like a production that was done specifically for television. But it's worth talking, I think, a little bit about Sidney Lumet because he's a legendary American film director. We've previously talked about him only once, but he's done such films as Network, Serpico, Failsafe, Prince of the City, and of course the one that we did cover, Dog Day Afternoon, which we talked about with the producer of The Guest, Keith Calder. He came on pretty early on during the show to talk about speaking of once again of another hot movie, another hot New York movie, a very pressure cooker kind of thing. And it has a really cool structure to it where like it starts as a lean bank robbery genre set piece kind of thing. And then slowly over the course of cranking the temperature on its characters reveals that is actually a symptom of a very sort of desperate type of person in a very desperate city. Is lots of stresses of sort of class and queer struggle kind of come up on the periphery. And, there's like a very gritty texture to it. And you have Pacino's very raw nerve kind of performance that he's giving. But all of this came from this man, Sidney Lumet, a Jewish American and Polish, with a Polish immigrant parents who got his artistic start actually in Yiddish theater and off-Broadway stage productions, which is why he's so uncommonly good in both Dog Day Afternoon and this film, as we'll talk about. So good at character and dialogue and paying attention to blocking and moving with the actors. And, he's very, very good at that. And that came from his experience both on the stage and also from directing TV, where he had to hone a style that a lot of people aren't the most excited to talk about because it's a style that, broadcast TV requires a lot of quick turnaround. It requires a lot of simple setups. It requires a sense of economy that, there's not a lot of very artful flourishes to his style. And actually, he says he's talked about it in a million interviews. He hopes that his directing is invisible to people and that he never put anything for the sake of anything. He never liked to exaggerate things. He was very you can get psychological subjectivity out of your characters by just having them give very natural performances and, maximizing the moments of their blocking, by using framing and, movement and staging and things like that. He's like, you don't have to be like a boring TV director who just puts the camera down. Yeah, his style is actually so reserved. He's actually been compared to neorealists at some point in his career. So you have this, this guy who grew up poor on New York, sort of like Lower East Side, who saw poverty and violent police firsthand. And, he as a result, he fell in love with all of these stories about, trying to maintain morality in corrupt society. And so many of his most well-known films are, about the subject: Failsafe, Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, Network. One of his early films that I saw as part of the Holocaust Film Festival that I helped program was a film called The Pawnbroker, which was about a Jewish concentration camp survivor who opens up a shop in Harlem and begins to relive his traumatic experiences, seeing the dehumanizing treatment of the poor and disenfranchised who live on his block, which he depicts through like these fractured flashback edits and stuff like that. So very much going back and seeing where this guy started, I think is interesting. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about this film, 12 Angry Men. Now, Jayson, I think we were talking a little bit before we started. You said that this was like one of like the first like classic films that you ever saw. So this one like really made an impression on you.
Yeah, this is I saw this at a very early age. I saw this, I think I maybe like 6th or 7th grade. I saw this one, and yeah, it blew me away. The overarching theme of it, the sense of justice, this one humane guy with a bunch of either skeptical or just straight up inhumane people in the room with him. And then you have, I think, too, this level of, you know, the criminal justice system, and as well how they view the defendant compared to how they view themselves. So it's it always made an impression on me.
Yeah. And I'm assuming most people are going to be familiar, but in case there is one person out there who is unfamiliar with the story of 12 Angry Men, it is very loosely about 12 jurors, all men, all very angry, who get locked in a room together on the hottest day of the year to deliberate on a case that's been presented to them about an 18-year-old Puerto Rican boy's guilt in the case of murdering his father. And when the film starts, there is like this sure thing. The prosecution put up like an airtight case. The dude is guilty. And, they are asked and charged with, reviewing the evidence and possibly putting him to death and giving him the death penalty for his crimes. And it is very much a, post-McCarthyism investigation of kind of prejudice and mob mentality and justice, and, a very sort of like High Noon as well from 1952, the Fred Zinnemann film with Gary Cooper. It's like a morality tale set against this idea of one person standing up and doing what's right in like a very sort of corrupt sort of process or a corrupt system in kind of a way, who in this film is played by Henry Fonda, who I also believe it's our first time talking about Henry Fonda, but who is a wonderful actor who I've seen lots of times and just has a real like intelligence and sensitivity to him that translates like really well on screen. It makes you really, he's very easily a confident and likable character without necessarily being like a tough character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the first thing that jumped out to me with this is like just the opening shot showing the giant pillars in the courthouse and just kind of like this overlooming architecture that goes in with the bureaucracy. Like it is very overwhelming, I imagine, to walk up those steps, especially if you're an 18-year-old that might be, up against the death penalty. I just think that his like slow pan showing just how huge this place is a great like starting point. Yeah,
and the low angle shots of like the pillars and everything as you like walk up the steps and
and then he kind of walks into the court too, and you see a couple people celebrating, which might be, if I'm not mistaken, the people that think the kid is guilty. And so they think that maybe they did a good job. I can't quite remember. I remember there's an old woman right before they get into the court that showed like she's kind of being she seems happy about what's going on. But then it goes into the court, shows this big pan of all of the jurors that we're going to see discuss this case in the room. And I just love all of the establishing shots. I think it's a great.
I love how bored the judge is as he's explaining to them, if there is even a slight bit of reasonable doubt in your mind, you guys, it needs to be a unanimous decision and you are faced with a grave responsibility. And I thank you, gentlemen, for, overseeing this case of premeditated first degree murder. And while he's saying this, he's like playing with a pencil, and he couldn't look like, he looks like he said this a million times,
just
and he does not at all
job.
he doesn't respect the severity of what's happening, and then it crossfades into the jury room where about 99% of the film is going to take place. There's a brief scene that takes place in the bathroom across the hall, and then there's a brief scene at the end that takes place outside the courthouse. But other than that, we crossfade into this room with the kid's face also superimposed over the room as they enter it, just like looming over the events. Like this is the kind of simple kind of filmmaking I was talking about that he very much does, but is very powerful. And yeah, that kid, he looks like a baby.
Yeah, like I thought until they say that he's 18, I thought he was like 14 or 15 years old. So they really do like accent how young this kid is and what he's really up against here. And yeah, it does the way that Sidney shoots these conversations is unbelievable. He does a lot of these things where he does like to establish where people are and kind of just the tension or just the feeling of the entire room. He does these wide shots of everybody talking, but often he'll, in order to show focus on two people having a conversation, he'll go from that wide shot and kind of zoom in to the two people to focus in on their conversation. It's just a great way of still signaling that, you know, everyone is having their own discussion about this thing, but right now we're channeled in on two people about this case. And he does that throughout. Does a lot of great close-ups when people have kind of like really definitive moments, like when they make a good point in their argumentation or something like that. He's just, it's very intelligent filmmaking.
Yeah, and I also think he does a good job, the filmmaking does a good job of understanding innately these are different, all these men are different, right? Like this idea of, I remember there was a scene where he's talking to one of the more analytical type of fellows, and he's got glasses on, and they're debating, you know, whether he can see that well. And there's a way where on the glasses and what they're talking about, and it's almost to say like, okay, well, yes, this is a stage play. Here is this characterization that we're doing.
Yeah, no, like I think that like the way that this is built around like long conversations between these characters in battles of like moral value, political value, contradictions in literally just the logistical procedure of the justice system, and like, you know, whether, you know, it's like whether they're being sort of petty or pedantic in terms of their arguments, or whether they actually are trying to come to some truth about, you know, sort of this subjective experience and things like that. And it turns this what like should be mundane, because jury duty, for anyone who has been partaking in it at all, it's the most boring thing in the universe. It's so long. You want to die, you want to sleep, like it. And really, to turn that into such a claustrophobic like pressure cooker of who we believe ourselves to be and our responsibility towards one another as like an organized people. Like it's really impressive, because Jamie was talking about like the build up to the dramatic moments, and then followed by like, you know, moments of rest and quiet to kind of like, you know, give you a break from it so that it can swell back up. But also just like the way that the camera follows a character when they get up because they're frustrated, and then it will, you know, stop and land with another character who then reacts to them. And as Jayson was putting it, then each character being like a fleshed out, unique person who comes from a different perspective. And we don't have time probably to get into like every single person's exact characteristics or anything, but like you leave this film being like, you get an idea of everyone's deal. Like Martin Balsam is in this film from Psycho, Cape Fear, All the President's Men, and he is like just a like high school football coach, and literally his immediate, you get a vibe of him immediately because he just like takes control of the voting, and he's just kind of, he doesn't really have a say one way or the other throughout the majority of the film, but he's there, he's present, he's listening. He's very different than say the guy who is jury number 7, who is the salesman, who's just there being like, oh my God, this needs to hurry up. I want to get to my baseball game. Who I imagine Jayson is in this situation. He just wants to get to that Yankees game.
So I do respect, you know, obviously I wish that he was taking this more seriously, but at the end, I could respect wanting to put your feet in one ball game. It's
I also
he really couldn't care less about this. Actually, it's very funny. He's like, man, I'm just trying to watch the ball game. And I think at one point someone's like, are you crazy? Like,
he's also a man of like very
life. We're talking about a man's life here. Like,
yeah. He's also a man of very like small pleasures, which I liked, because eventually, after all of this, this really heated discussion has happened. It's about like 50 minutes to an hour into the film, and he gets the fan working, and he's like, things are looking up. Like, it just like everything is still heated, but at least we're a little cooler. I did really like that. I also like when the jurors start to use their like that specific personality trait about him, even when he's kind of doing the right thing, but he's doing it for the wrong reasons. Like, he's just like, once again, I'm going to switch my vote to not guilty, but it's not because I actually think it. It's just because he wants to get to the game and wants to get out of there. And even someone that thinks that the kid isn't guilty still pressures him and is just like, well, you're doing this for the wrong reasons, and I don't respect you for that. So I like that they start to attack their kind of like the personality traits that are directly connecting to their arguments. It's just really smart writing.
Yeah, it is. It is very much so.
You really get a good sense of all of these different characters. You have Lee J. Cobb from The Exorcist, who is playing the very hot-tempered guy who is kind of estranged from his son and is very dog-headedly passionate about, like killing this kid essentially because of his relationship, personal relationship to his son. And then you have the juror who is like, he's a very analytical, like, stockbroker, who is the guy who's very much about the facts, and he's definitely like the coolest one, the most reasonable, quote unquote reasonable, but like to a point that it's almost frequently he's ignoring humanity. And I love too that they have little moments of dialogue where they address that. They're like, man, don't you ever sweat? And he's like, no, I don't. Because like, it's the hottest day of the year. They got the windows open. Everyone is so uncomfortable. And this guy is like full suit, will never sweat in his life. Like, it is a moment where he is like a reptile man to these characters. And there's lots of great little moments like that.
I have a take about what that guy is supposed to represent. I mean, we can get to it later. But
no, we can do it.
Yeah. So a lot of what this movie, I think, is a response to is kind of like the lynch mob idea of the McCarthy era, right? Like the lynch mob hysteria, and it's a rebuttal to it. That's kind of what I kind of feel about it.
Absolutely.
And I think juror number 4 kind of represents, and you got stuff going on now that is kind of like this, represents a kind of soulless establishment person that is ignoring humanity for this like fact thing, and this like
it's like purely logical to an extent that there's no emotion at all.
Yeah, and I think he represents stuff that's still even going on in the mainstream level of the Democratic Party about kind of not talking to people and only focusing on themselves and what their process is. And while he might be a better person than juror number 10, who's like the actual bigot, he's still not where he needs to be. You know what I mean? So I think that's always when I've watched that's always how I've interpreted juror number 4 to be.
Yeah, and I also like when he.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, kind of going off what you said, Josh, about the sweat line. I like that eventually when his argumentation is broken down, it shows one beat of sweat over his head as if it's like, oh, it's that one time that his logic or whatever, his unbreakable logic was defeated. And that's also the same point, I think, when he decides to also go not guilty. But, he has to. His point needs to be driven into the ground before he finally gets there. And I just love that they show that little bead of sweat as if, he's finally broken down.
Yeah, well, and I love that all of this stems from Henry Fonda's character, juror number 8, who he's a very interesting character because he's the one person, and they all go, there's always one. He's the one guy who votes not guilty on the first pass. Like, immediately, all of those people on the fly were ready to just kill this kid, like off the and he was like, and his reasoning wasn't that I don't think he's guilty. His reasoning at the beginning is, I think that it should be more of a discussion, the idea of killing a kid. kid. Like, that's it. Like, that's his only, he's just like, this kid deserves a little bit of dignity. There is supposed to be some sort of sanctity to the way that these events go. And very clearly, none of these people are giving it the seriousness or severity that, you know, the decision is meant to have, not even the judge. So he takes it upon himself to be like, I will force these people to think about this more severely. And over the course of the film, as it, you know, sort of develops, it just kind of becomes a series of going back through the evidence with these characters, and each person kind of coming to a realization that we're like, oh, that, you know, there's something interesting about that, where if you bring in outside context that wasn't manipulated by the prosecution and you think about it as a human being for a second, you know, all of a sudden you're just like, there's a little bit of doubt there. And a little bit of doubt there obviously is the kind of thing that, you know, you're supposed to not kill a person over.
And I like that it starts just with that, right? It's just the idea of, like you said, he's not necessarily not guilty, but we don't know enough, so we need to have this discussion. And even after he gets one of the other jurors on his side, I believe it's the old man, he even outright says that it's just the same thing. He doesn't necessarily believe the kid isn't guilty, but he also thinks it warrants discussion. So it's just, I think it's these like small pushes that just happen throughout the film until finally each person's argument is broken down so that they can at least see that, you know, it's not, it can't possibly be a certain thing. And that's really what they're looking for, is a, you know, hard evidence. It's a certainty that this kid murdered his father because we're sending him to an electric chair. Yeah, I just love that it's just a series of like little pushes until everybody's seeing, at least with a more open mind.
Yeah, I mean, like you spoke about the old man. He gets actually one of my favorite moments where they're testing the evidence, which is they're going through one of the oral witnesses. So there's an old man who lives beneath the apartment that the boy lived in, and he testifies on the stand that he heard the boy yell, "I'm gonna kill you," and then he heard a body fall on the floor, and he heard the kid run down the stairs, and he went to his door fast enough that he saw the kid run down the stairs away from the scene of the crime. So he didn't witness anything exactly, but he heard it. And they compare that with other testimony from a woman who was living across and who could see through the L train, see the actual stabbing took place. And they go, well, how could the old man have heard that altercation take place, including what the boy yelled and including the man falling, if the train had been going by, because it's so loud. And I love how it too comes from a sense of like, you know, sort of like local personality, where they go,
experience,
look, who are the 3 or 4 of us who are poor enough to have lived right next to the fucking train?
Yes, exactly.
And they go, well, you know, I can tell you from experience that I've wanted to tear my ears off every single time a train goes by. Like you would not have heard anything. And the old man steps up and actually expresses, he provides a sort of emotional theory to, they go, well, why would this old man say he heard something he didn't hear? And he goes, look, I'm an old man. I'm at the end of my life. I'm someone who realized that maybe my life didn't have as much meaning and importance as I hoped that it would. And I would understand wanting to trick yourself into believing that you could be helpful in a case like this. And there's something the way the camera pushes in while he talks about that, and you can so see in his performance that he's talking about, you know, decades of life experience that could lead to someone doing something wrong and not knowing that. And I think that, to me, speaks to what the film is trying to do all the time, which is trying to bring in, you know, local, real, lived in context, decades of life experience and humanity, and trying to be like, this information should be what's included in a case. It shouldn't just be, you know, a forced confession or a prosecution just hammering home and, you know, not giving you every piece of information that you should have. And the film makes a really great emotional case for it with its writing.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think too, in a lot of ways, it goes back to how raw I think the characterization is, the script is in this too. Right? I mean, it's Reginald Rose is such a great screenplay in this. I mean, as you talked about the older man, and I think he's also talked about himself in a lot of ways. As you talked about, you know, his life experience, and then you have, and then you have juror number 6 who you know, doesn't like the elderly being abused, right? Like that really doesn't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and you just have like certain idiosyncrasies for every single juror. Besides 8, by the way, which is funny, we don't really know that much about 8 besides him being this human justice-seeking architect guy, right? Like we don't know anything about him in terms of the like little details as we do like the other jurors, kind of.
Yeah, like not like number 5, who we learned like grew up like in the slums, right? Who is like the character who's really upset by all the racism because he's just like, look, I've lived in this kid's situation, and not every kid is like a violent monster who can't speak English. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is very clearly none of you have know a poor person.
Yeah, I also love when he spins the guy's racism against him. Like he uses his own stupid racist logic, and he's like, you will believe this woman who is of Mexican descent, but won't believe in this kid. So I just like that they like spin his ridiculous logic against him, and they do it again, not with the racist guy, but with the angry guy that stays until the very end as guilty. And I can't remember exactly what they do, but he gets so flustered and is so hardened in his point that eventually his very point kind of does this like horseshoe effect that goes around and proves the point he was not trying to make. And I also loved those writing beats where they were using their own kind of like logical fallacies against them and their own racism against them.
Yeah, it definitely has a great buildup where it builds with, we are just slowly analyzing sort of details and trying to come to some sort of truth about it. They're small little ones, like when juror number 8 pulls out a knife, a switchblade knife, and he's like, yeah, I went down the street and I bought this knife. And they were like, this kid's story, it's supposed to be that he went and bought a knife and then he lost the knife and then all of a sudden his father was killed. And like that's obviously an insane coincidence, but he goes, dude, he grows up in a place where there are lots of people yelling at each other. There is all kinds of domestic violence, and you can buy a knife on any fucking street corner. He's just like, it's not like it's not like as much of a coincidence when you put in the real world context of it. And there's a part where the juror that you were talking about, Jamie, he picks up the knife and tries to show how he would like plunge the knife into his dad, and literally one guy just chimes in and goes, that's not the right knife. Because literally he confused the one that juror number 8 bought at a store and the one that's actually supposed to be the murder weapon. So then that's like a little moment where he goes, oh, wow, like those two things could be indistinguishable to someone. Like someone could mistake those things even on like a small level like that. And my favorite moment with him is the one where he starts going on his rant about this idea of, all you guys got your hearts bleeding all over the table about this kid and his background and, blah, 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 blah. And they immediately go like, well, why are you so for this? Like no one is being like, this is the most innocent child in the world. We're just going, is he guilty of this? And we're just going through the process. And he eventually reveals himself to just like be so bloodthirsty for this kid that they literally juror number 8 insults him and calls him a public avenger, and you are trying this personally, not due to the facts, and you are a sadist. And what does he say to him? He says to him, I will kill you. And they briefly brought up earlier, how could the man overhear this kid saying, I'll kill you, and then him not have killed him? Because obviously if you say that means you're going to do it. And then juror number 8 gets to retort in that moment with, you don't really mean you'll kill me, do you? And he just absolutely slaps him in the face with it, which is around the point where like they finally get the vote like 6-6 evenly split. They call it extra innings. Like there's a little bit of sort of like sense of humor to it, but it is like very satisfying watching it just go around the table and just watching each person go, okay, enough has been built. I'm voting not guilty. I'm changing my vote. I'm going not guilty.
Enough for doubt.
You just slowly watch him win people over.
Somehow the movie is like incredibly within the confines of the room, but it's also very cosmic, right? Because you have everything always circles back with one another. You talked about kind of them not recognizing the knife, it's kind of going back to this idea of like the glasses thing, right? Like, and you do, how well do you really see things, or how well do you really remember what movie you saw last week, right? It's always something always has to do with the other case or the other details about the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I love
everything is definitely used. Like if a piece of information is brought up, it's used like 3 or 4 times before the movie is over, because again, it's all about intersecting these things. He's like, all of this evidence has to make sense together to tell a story. So it's almost like they're breaking it down piece by piece and being like, well, what doesn't make sense? And they literally cast doubt on every single piece of evidence over the course of the film.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite parts, and I think you mentioned it, Josh, but also just how it deals with the class as well, with the guy that shows them the switchblade, and he says like he grew up around them, so he knows that you can't even use them that way because of the switch itself. And I loved his little performance of like how you would hold it, because if you held it the way that they're saying and flipped it, you'd just cut yourself. And yeah, I thought that was a fantastic use of just the different character classes and personalities. And the other one that I just find more entertaining than anything, ironically, is the guy that just kind of seems to, he's not excited that he's there, but he's excited that it was a murder trial and not like a normal criminal thing, like a robbery or something. He's just like, it's a little more exciting, right? Like he's trying to get like some entertainment out of it or something like that. It's dark, but I got something out of that.
Which number do you remember?
I was trying to remember. Is that the Don Draper juror number 12, the guy who's like a very distractible like advertising executive?
Yeah, and he's got that charm. Like he's the only one.
He's
that's
always
like
taking his glasses on and
smiling.
off.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite. He's always
honestly, he's Roger Sterling if Roger was in this movie.
Yeah.
Roger Sterling was in this movie. That's your number 12.
Yeah, he's definitely just trying to like charm the room as if he's in like a business meeting or something like that.
Yeah.
He also flip-flops the most of like any other character. He's like, oh, I don't know, man. Like I keep going, I don't know, back, and and Yeah. So, but yeah, it is cool how once again, like there's so much, fleshed out personality to each one of these characters. Like there's the watchmaker, the polite Italian watchmaker guy who's very cool, and who is the guy who gets a great bit where he gets to correct the other guy's English. He gets to correct the racist English, even though very clearly English is his second language. And, there's lots of great, little moments like that, and a lot of sort of like righteous fury to it as well. Like, I mean, even when it's pretty ahead of its time in terms of trying to get people off of death row, but like even I think people talk about the most sort of like questionable piece of evidence they bring up is the whole idea about like the memory that like the guy how could he not have remembered the fact that he went and saw a movie and who was in the movie? And they bring up, well, it was just, he had to come back and see his father stabbed, and the police were taking this testimony, and it might have been under duress and shock and who knows, and like you can hardly remember the movie you saw last week not under shock. And for anyone who like follows up with like people trying to get people off death penalty cases and stuff, false confessions due to like interrogation tactics and shock is like so horribly common. It's insane. And that like wouldn't have been mainstream knowledge at this point that this film came out, but like it's still addressed in here. So, like Lumet, as always, I mean, even with Dog Day Afternoon and other films that we've talked about of his, like he was very, very ahead of the curve on, putting in all of these social and sort of political forces into the periphery of his film, but still making it like a very thrilling, like character engagement, moment to moment kind of thing, where you're totally engrossed by the psychology of these characters and how they fight among one another, how they move within the space of the room and everything like that.
Yeah, like just speaking of the movement, I like when they start to try to demonstrate like timed events, such as when Fonda
Yeah,
gets
that's a
up
great
and
moment.
like limps over to one side of the room and back to see if the timing of 15 seconds would be accurate. Then eventually he gets a full
that's almost
diagram.
exciting, like the tracking
Yeah.
shot of like of him being like, all right, you set your watch, and there's like a close up on the sweaty guy's face as he's, you know, the nerdy guy, he's got his watch ready to go. He's like, okay, I'm waiting for it to hit exactly the minute.
Right.
And then, you know, then we follow him for a minute in real time as he replicates this walk to prove that the guy could not have made it to the door to see the kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just and I like that he locks it in too. Like there's no cuts away from Fonda slowly limping from one side of the room to the next. He just you're sitting in the process, and then I think it might be before or after, I can't remember. But then he takes out like a diagram of the entire layout of the apartment
Right.
and starts pointing out like where people would be running and all of that. So like I don't know if you'd call them action beats, but I guess just because most of it is people arguing with each other, they feel kind of exciting in that way.
Yeah, I mean, Lumet's such a brilliant director in that he really understands setting in a way that's really unique. He understands setting, and he understands putting people in a pressure cooker in a room together and following them and seeing their body language, right? One of the more infamous shots for me in Not Do the Right Thing, sorry, in The Dog Afternoon is when Sheena realizes the police is watching and he kind of like drops on the railing, like kind of squats, like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Not even oh shit, but more like oh fuck. We're done. And he does that several times here in 12 Angry Men, right? In a much different sense, in a much more of a formal sense, in a much more of a minimalistic sense, but it's still, you still have a lot of shots of like pure body language and pure angst. And I mean, it's fantastic.
It's like the first, like even the establishing shot when we were talking about how it fades from the kid's face into the room. There's a long shot of just every single character being introduced and talking to one another, and it's kind of like your first taste of their personalities. But it's just so fluid and smooth the way he goes all the way around the room to introduce you to everybody. It's just he's amazing at translating information with the camera.
Yeah, well, and despite once again being restricted to this minimal location, like it's very exciting, and a huge part of that is one, Lumet, a huge rehearsal guy. So apparently he would have these guys rehearse for hours and hours and hours just to get them frustrated at each other in a cramped room as like real people, and then he'd be like, "Okay, now we're shooting."
With no air conditioning.
But there's also yeah, and there's also this amazing technique that he does in this that I think is like integral to the whole thing, which is his gradual shifting of eye lines and lenses, which is like the really huge thing that a lot of people have talked about this before because it's like such a famous little bit of like the form matching the content, which is he starts the film with a lot of wide angle lenses and basically like higher angle shots, which generates a lot of depth of focus and a lot of space and room for the characters. And then over the course of the film, by the end of the film, he's basically exclusively shooting in lower angle framing on telephoto lens, which totally squeezes and constricts that information. So all of a sudden, all of these characters feel, even though he doesn't have to go to an insane close-up of their face to do it, it feels like the camera and the framing and everything has just gotten tighter and they've gotten closer together and it's becoming more unbearable. And this shift happens very naturally and gradually over the course of the film, and it's one of the many techniques that, again, visually that he deploys that just it make this just slightly more impactful than it should, because a movie that is as, again, restricted as this should not be as exciting as this is, and honestly in some cases as simple as it is. Like when we finally get to like the big dramatic sort of climactic moments, and it literally is just the rest of the room being like, well, this guy is clearly the only people who are saying not guilty or who are saying guilty anymore are the people who are very clearly personally prejudiced. Because as soon as they won the analytical guy over with the glasses story, where they go, well, the witness had impressions on her nose, which means that she wears glasses. And, you know, she got up in the middle of the night. She definitely didn't put her glasses on. The guy with glasses will tell you don't sleep with your fucking glasses on. So she probably saw a blur and just assumed that it was who the other witness identified. So you have two witnesses then, you know, who can't necessarily be trusted, or at least their testimony should have a slight bit of doubt to them.
Yeah.
So as soon as they lose the facts guy,
and the racist guy just defeats himself essentially. Like he gets
he
just
starts ranting.
Yeah, people. I love the shot. Like after he goes through this, you know, big 5-minute bigoted rant. Every single character just turns away. So you have this wide shot of the entire room, and every single person is facing away from the table except for the racist guy. And he just walks over to a corner and shamefully just puts his head down and kind of like in that sense, that's when he's defeated, because when the one guy, it might be Fonda, walks over to him to get the new verdict or whatever, he just kind of shakes his head like, yeah, he's not guilty. I've completely defeated myself here, and everyone has been exposed to who I really am.
Like he's literally screaming about how, like, you know, like the kid comes from
you can't trust these people. And yeah.
And he even does
he was like something gets killed and they don't care. They have no feelings.
Right. You know? Yeah. It's like, I know a few good ones, but the most of them, no.
Yeah. He even pulls that line.
Yeah. He literally says that, you know, they got some nice qualities. I know a nice couple, you know, one of them, but overall they're dangerous.
I mean, honestly, it goes back to this idea of like, these things have been happening for so long, right? Like, I mean, obviously, like, I don't know, 1957 is not that long, but we think of these things as just like sometimes like in the moment, where it's kind of like, oh, I mean, like people have been talking like this for a while now, right? This, like, some of them are good, but not all of them, and so I think, and
eventually,
I love when they turn their backs. It's a very moving and revealing scene about the politics of the movie as well, right? It is, it is. Movie really understands what it is and the character that that it has and that the people in the movie has, right? It understands what the right side is and what the right side is, but it's still a movie. It's not heavy-handed. It doesn't play its hand ever. It lets it play out, but it really does understand innately the idea of it, and, you know, who is in the right and who's in the wrong, and who's
and in that moment specifically, it's this idea of, you know, Henry Fonda, before everyone was kind of indifferent and not treating this as a serious thing. Like, it was people not being part of the community process of being aware and being active in, you know, and at that point in the film, like, everyone is active, like everyone is paying attention to what this guy is saying. And it's like, wow, if we actually paid attention to what was being said behind the lines of what was going on with the prosecution and like what was actually being done here, this is very clearly just, you know, a racist storm to kill this kid in a way. Because if you were to break this down, you know, as they have seriously, it's like, it doesn't add up like at all. Yes. So as a result, you know, at that point you have, and so I like that it's this big wide shot where all of the characters are blocked to have like this sort of a collective decision that everyone is going to stop listening to this guy. And, you know, and so it is like, it's a, you know, it is kind of like an obvious moment, but it is a moment that I think is earned, and I think it's well done. And it works really, really well when they have that moment and there's literally one guy left, like literally the guy who is clearly projecting his own issues with his own son and wants to punish his own son and wants to use those feelings as a reason that, you know, this kid needs to be guilty. And they literally just let him also go on like an insane rant until, you know, he like throws this picture of his son down and he realizes like what it is that he's doing, because his speech is actually just like nonsense arguments. Like he's very just stubbornly trying to maintain positions that are no longer factual.
Well, that's the thing. He's kind of like repeating all of the evidence that we've already seen and essentially debunked, at least in the sense that you could say he's outright a guilty person. So as he's going on this ramble, it already feels like, well, we've already gone through all this, man. You're just kind of sticking to your guns for no real reason at this point. And then, when the son thing is exposed, it's pretty sad, honestly. And I do like that the movie, with using Fonda, kind of has still sympathy for all of these characters that, like, clearly some of them were just, it seemed like, wanted to go on with their day and weren't thinking much of it until they were forced to, which is a good thing. And then the others really had more like deep-seated issues that were directly relating to their decisions in the case. And I do like that they still have a little bit of sympathy for the guy that was clearly going through something really deep and dark with his son, just with Fonda kind of putting the coat over him to kind of console him, like, hey, you still made the right decision of saying, you know, not guilty. And even though you did something that was pretty heinous throughout the day, you know, I can kind of understand where you're coming from in some sense. I still see you as a human being. The racist guy doesn't get much of that, but
his whole argument,
deserve,
right?
But,
is like a principled one. It is like, you should not be applying your own personal thing, because again, Fonda even says it himself many times throughout the film, which I think is smart, which is that, you know, he's like, I don't know that he's you know, 100% not guilty, but it's possible. And that's it. You know, it's just like that. That is the whole point of anything. And they go, you know, you can suppose anything, but it's like, what is a collective society that doesn't, you know, sort of like obey this process in a way? You know, like that's one that is going to just kill people for absolutely no reason. Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that is obviously, like, you know, very upsetting to him. It's not necessarily determining specific guilt, innocence of this case. It's something bigger. It is, how can you put this like certain systemic judgment on one of you, without actually giving it, you know, some sort of thought as a group, you know?
And it's an allegory. It's not only, as you said, it's not only just about the case. It's an allegory for just American life in general, right? Like this idea of like, how can you really judge people without understanding these are their circumstances of this?
Right.
Exactly.
You know, like I love, you made up a really good point. You said a really good point. I love when Fonda keeps saying like, look, I don't know. He could be, but like, look, let's actually talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're about to send a kid to the chair.
Yeah. We're about to send a kid to his death. So let's actually think about this for a second. You know what I mean? And like, I think understand that people, but also that they deserve as much discussion and empathy, resources as possible to help them, not help them succeed, but help them kind of sort of not be in prison, if you will. Like, so, it's a movie that has more depth than you would think, just judging from it on face value. As I keep watching the movie more and more, I think last time was like my fifth watch. I keep realizing, wow, this is just an allegory for a lot of different things and a lot of larger look at humanity and the way it works.
Yeah. And I also love the small detail of them just being these, like, even to themselves, the characters, they are just kind of nameless personalities and numbers in a way until the very end when Fonda introduces himself to the old man and they kind of exchange like a moment of real humanity where they just see them as the person they are instead of just that juror number that they're trying to convince. So I really enjoyed that ending note as well. And just once again, to accent on the kind of the sadness of that last juror that hung on until the end, just him like slowly walking down the steps with his head down, just completely defeated. And, you know, now we know the knowledge of like just what his relationship with his son and all of that. So yeah, there is some really great final images that all happen in one shot too, which is impressive.
Yeah, no, those moments, like those ones, like those very human moments of doubt and realization that a lot of time he captures in these really, beautiful close-up frames of their faces as they realize them. Like it's the most important stuff, because it literally is like you have this, this unthinking, brutal system at the start of it that totally uncaring and without a thought in the world was going to kill this kid. And by the end, you have all of these characters who admit with serious thought and consideration that they are fallible, and that is, I think, ultimately what it wants to do. You should not assume that you are a higher than the person that you are judging, that you are, just as capable of being flawed and lower, which the camera literally over the course of the film gets lower. Mm-hmm. It's very well developed in that way. And if we are pivoting, I think, towards reductive rating, around which you've been on before, Jayson, but we remove all the words and all the nuance and give the film a rating between 1 and 5, but it's also become final statements or any scenes or specific lines. And there is a lot of lines in this film that we can't get to. Like, it is like a word a minute kind of thing that I couldn't take notes fast enough. So if there's any lines we didn't get that you want to bring up at the end, this is definitely where we're going to do that. But for me, this is still, I've watched this quite a few times, and it does just barely dodge the 5 for me. It's the Jamie 4 for me. It's a very high 4. I do think that for all the difficult ideas that it raises in its subject matter, which I think it does really, really well, every time I get to the ending, I do feel it's a little bit pat and optimistic, and not entirely in a bad way, just in kind of a quick way for me. And it's really the only knock I could possibly give. I think this is like as well directed and acted of a movie as you could possibly get. There just is a small element to me on rewatches that I think a lot of people do really like about the film that definitely always sits with me a little bit, which is that, because it's about many, many other things, but it's partially about the desire that we also see a lot of online. Jayson, you've probably seen this, about like wanting to own your opponent so bad they see the error of their ways. And as we've seen with sort of mob mentality and like hardcore racists and various other things, they're not necessarily defeated by like bursts of logical debate in a lot of ways. I could feel Aaron Sorkin being born in that moment where he's like, he's an ignorant slob that don't even speak good English. And he's like, doesn't speak good English, sir. So there's a couple things like that for me are just, it's very much
definitely like that Jeff Daniels famous
the newsroom. There's a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I feel what you're saying. I really enjoy it, but I get what you're saying.
Now, I think that this is like a really amazing version of that. I don't think it's at all like, I think this is an incredible film once again. And I do honestly like living briefly in this world where like that's a true thing that could happen, that you show someone that they're wrong and they reverse their decisions. And, it's something that we should aspire to for sure. And it's really the only slight misstep for me. And like what otherwise is, again, an incredibly directed, perfectly acted film, and again a testament to what an amazing craftsman can do under restrictions and limitations of a story such as this. Like, this thing moves, and the battles of wit
3 weeks
and psychology and crazy and ideology, like it's all as thrilling as could be under these circumstances. And this is definitely the best film anyone will ever force you to watch in civic class.
No. There is an academic quality to this movie. And I totally agree with both of y'all said. It's like there are things in this movie that are replicated by other people, but in like the worst quality.
Yeah.
It's like, it's definitely influenced. You can tell it's definitely influenced a lot of like people that I'm like, oh my God, I can't stand this writer or I can't stand this director. But because Lumet has such a innate way of viewing humanity and viewing people and viewing the way people interact with each other, and viewing the way personal feelings to get in the way of what people think, and Lumet, and every single Lumet movie as well, there's always something I think that goes against the grain of the movie, right? So Network, for example, sees Faye Dunaway as like the only woman executive, but also views her as this soulless woman, which she is, right? yeah, I mean, Dog Day Afternoon kind of, yes, it sees Sonny as a flawed person, but it also sees him as a violent person as well, right? It does not really it gives him less, it does give him grace, but it gives him less like of a positive note than I think people view. Mm-hmm. And even Lee J. Cobb in this, I think Lee J. Cobb was really fantastic in this. It might be my favorite performance in this. He just brings so much to that last scene. That scene should have got him like nominated or won an award just for that one scene. Seriously, one scene winners are don't happen a lot, but that's one of them for me. It's a phenomenal, powerful performance. Just so raw, and I think and I think putting that jacket on him goes against what you would usually see in the movies, right? Like shunning this man who has said, who has used his personal relationship with his son as a ethos in this case, still gives him some grace. And I think, and I think it's another allegory for you still need to be able to empathize with the people you disagree with in order to win them over.
Yeah.
In order to win them over. And you see that in real life. And I don't think enough people know how to do that anymore. I really do.
So for you, is this the 5, Jayson?
I have it on 5 on my Letterboxd, and I'll keep it at 5. I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah, I definitely agree with y'all that. Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys that the people who have followed this movie since and used kind of the ethos of the movie have done it in the worst way possible. But I think when someone connects on something, someone connects on something, right? I think for Wall Street, for example, people have seen them. For example, people have seen a movie like that and have kind of tried to use that in the way, and it's satire, and to their example, and have failed miserably at it. Adam McKay, for example. But The Wolf of Wall Street is still amazing, and I feel the same way about 12 Angry Men, and so 5 for me.
Nice. I'll we should probably get to Oxbow, so I'll keep it short, but I'm in the high 4. I really do think one of these days it could get to the 5. I guess with me, a lot of the time with film, if it's heavy on the dialogue, normally that would stop me. But I mean, Sidney just has such a control over the camera and the way that he does all these close-ups at really great moments, emphasizing certain characteristics and arguments and all of that. I mean, it's fantastic. I really don't even know what I have to say against it. I don't even really mind the kind of clean ending, just because I think it's a group of men kind of finally coming together to see something larger than themselves. A lot of the beginning was them just kind of selfishly neglecting the case, and I think it's just nice to see that they took it seriously, that one person could convince them to maybe take this seriously, because we are literally putting an 18-year-old's life on the line. They became like active participants in their community, right? Versus being like, only interested in getting to the Yankees game on time. Right, exactly.
Right.
Which is why, again, I really like that last little thing with Fonda putting the coat over the last juror who's kind of lost this relationship with his son, just saying like, hey, you did the wrong thing today, but I understand at least somewhat of where you're coming from. It still came from a very human place. I think this is just a beautiful film. So 4 out of 5 for now, but it could get there one day. It is absolutely a classic.
If I may, what's interesting is Network, which is also a heavy dialogue movie, is not a 5 for me. Network is very heavy dialogue, I think, to its detriment, and that Network is a 3.5 on my Letterboxd. So I totally understand what y'all are saying. Like Network for me is a 3.5 because like you talk about heavy dialogue. I don't love Network, and so I appreciate it but don't love it. So mine is like 3.5. But for this one,
I'm kind of in the same boat with you on Network. Also, Jamie, you know me, I just love a miserable ending. This ending is too happy, which is why I'm really stoked. That's a great transition. It's a good segue, I think. That's gonna wrap it up for 12 Angry Men from 1957. We're gonna be right back, and you should stick around because we're gonna get same premise, incredibly grim. We're gonna be talking about the 1943 film, The Oxbow Incident. Stick around.
Hanging's any man's business that's around. That's just a brief idea of what you'll find on the Oxbow Incident. We at the studio think it's one of the most daring and unusual pictures ever made. Jammed with emotional and dramatic impact from the start to the amazing climax. When you see it, we believe you'll agree.
All right, we are back and we are talking The Oxbow Incident, the 1943 American Western directed by one William A. Wellman and based on the 1940 novel of the same name by Walter Van Tilburg Clark, a novelist based out of Nevada, where the events of the film are set, and also adapted by Lamar Trotty, who I learned on this watch, who actually wrote John Ford's Young Mr. Lincoln, which actually shares a little bit of principles to it. Young Mr. Lincoln probably belongs more in the 12 Angry Men catalog than this, because this is something else. And a huge reason for that is William A. Wellman, who's a director we haven't talked about on the show, but he's a director from Massachusetts who was a self-described delinquent boy who grew up mostly stealing cars and working in a lumber yard and like playing hockey before he was eventually drafted into World War I, where he was a frontline fighter pilot who saw real action and reportedly shot down at least 8 other aircrafts. Which very famously inspired his film Wings from 1927, which is probably one of the most famous and earliest and most immersive examples of dogfighting on screen. He even taught Buddy Rogers how to fly and invented cameras to shoot in real biplanes.
He's the original Tom Cruise, baby.
100 years he beat Tom Cruise to the punch in filming in real planes, and he would eventually go on to work in all kinds of genres, including comedies, noirs, dramas. He did the original Stars Born, which many people don't know, he also did his big breakthrough was the pre-code gangster film from Warner Brothers called The Public Enemy, starring James Cagney, which is probably the one most people are familiar with. It's a really dark and mean and shocking piece of crime cinema about a poor kid who gets corrupted into a full-blown psychopath, and it very famously inspired a lot of Martin Scorsese's gangster films. And it's very expressively shot with incredible passages of mood. There's like this amazing shootout in it that takes place inside a building while the camera remains outside in the rain, like listening to the shooting and the screaming and stuff. And it has one of the darkest endings you'll ever see in one of those films. And it came out in 1931. So Damn. If you were wondering why does this Western have a bit of a different vibe to it, that is why, William A. Wellman. So this film, again, based on the 1940 novel, for anyone unfamiliar with kind of like the loose story, it follows Gil Carter, played once again by Henry Fonda, juror number 8 from 12 Angry Men, as part of a cowboy troupe that wanders into, I believe it is, what is it called? Bridger's Pass, I want to say is that what it's
Bridger's
called?
Wells.
Or yeah. So Bridger's Wells, that's right, Nevada. Yeah. And they come into town just in time to hear news that a local rancher has been murdered and his cattle has been stolen. And, you know, they are kind of presumed a little bit to maybe be suspicious fellows because they are strangers who have just come into town. But immediately, all of the townspeople and the 2 cowboys and a few other characters form a posse to go and hunt down whoever it is has killed this local rancher and stolen his cattle. And the most interesting thing about this film is that that's it. That's the film. It's 75 minutes. It really does kind of give you with there's a little bit of whiplash to it and how it starts as a classical Western genre film for probably about like 20 minutes or so. And then you think it's going to, become a little bit more epic in scope. And by the time you get an hour into the film, you're like, oh, wait, no, this is it. This is the whole movie. We're just going to watch these guys consider killing some innocent dudes. And then spoiler alert, which, doing it. And and it's so fascinating to me in that way. When the first time I watched it, I was totally floored by it. It feels like the kind of thing that you would hear a characters talking about as a story that like off screen at the beginning of another Western. Like it's like it feels like sort of like a setup. It feels like a simple sort of like moral tale that people are telling, but that has been like adapted to feature length, where you're just like forced to sit in the misery and the fatalism of what these characters decide to do.
Yeah.
But like 12 Angry Men's sort of examination on, one, you have like the death penalty, the justice system, the masculine social pressures towards violence. You have all of those same elements going on here, and also once again a bunch of men, deliberating on the fact that, are we going to really kill this person? Is this the right thing to do? Is, like, it's a very bleak examination in that way, and it sits you in the process once again of their decision making, and characters once again drawn with a complex range of emotion and opinion on the dreadful act of violence that they can feel themselves all being swept up into in really interesting ways, especially too, like, the amount of like faulty information and clashing personalities and sort of just the general air of hostility and impatience and anger that all of these characters feel, because it's such a personal crime to them, right?
Yeah, the impatience seems like it's really accented. Like, I think the first thing you're introduced when this whole thing really begins, because they go into the bar and they kind of have like a very classic Western thing where, whiskey is the only thing that we got at this bar, and they start taking shots, and he gets into a little bit of a scuffle and whatever. But when the guy reports what has happened to, it's a rancher, right? Is that who is killed, supposedly killed?
Yeah, Larry Kincaid, one of the local ranchers.
Right. And he just kind of like rushes in, and right away it gives this feeling of just kind of like rushing to conclusions and kind of like just this bloodthirst that happens right away with all of the people. They kind of assume that they can take all of these people and with a right mind go about enacting justice. And it just seems from the very get-go, the way that people are talking to each other, the way that people are talking about the case itself, it just seems like no one's at a real level head, and that they're really just looking to kind of like exercise the power that they've been given. They even kind of accent a few things with one of the deputies saying he's going to deputize all of the people so that they can legally kill the people when they find them. So it's just these like really stupid gray lines that they're dealing with here, where it's like, well, we know it's wrong, but now we've made it legal, so it doesn't really matter anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really, really, really love this movie. This is I had not seen this one until Josh, you brought it to me, and then this is now my second time seeing it. Last night this morning I screened it. So this is my second time of seeing it. And I think, to your point, the man just it started making jokes about women, and it's a regular thing. And then the man was in and announces someone's been murdered. I think what you're seeing is, in this town, people are scared. They're looking for justice in a way. They're not really looking for justice, but rather looking for retribution, and rather, I think, looking for order. Right, this idea of like law and order, and so that's why they're immediately forming a posse, right, as opposed to like letting things play out. Right, you have a town that's in fear. So I think that's also another idea of what we're dealing with in this movie, is not really just jurors, but more so kind of a look at a town and look at the organization or lack thereof, or kind of the politics of this town, right? So this one's really, really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, and really the person that has to make all of the argumentations is the one guy that is going to. Well, there's three that are going to be possibly hanged, but one of them seems to be the guy that they're really having the arguments with about like what the evidence is that they have against them, the evidence that they have to say that they're innocent. Yeah, it seems instead of, them as a group talking about it, it's more like just this giant group of people up against the people that will be the ones killed, which I find an interesting difference in dynamics there.
Yeah, I like
and I also think it's way less. I also think it's way less righteous and way less righteous and way more intending to teach, and much more of like, okay, you're waiting for this grim thing to happen,
Yeah.
I never once. Right. Whereas 12 Angry Men has this mood of like, okay, juror number 8 is going to try to convince you. This is very much just like, we are waiting for a thing to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole movie,
true.
it kind of feels like, okay, we're looking up to this thing that's about to just go down. And this is just the detail, but this thing's definitely going to go down. You kind of just feel that way. And so it's yeah.
That's true.
Spoiler.
There is like a
Yeah,
tone that really, as the film goes on, like you want to have a little bit of hope that, you know, it's going to be this thing where like they learn their ways of the mob mentality and move on with their lives, and they barely get away, but they don't get hanged. But as the film goes, it just gets deeper and deeper into this like dark atmosphere and this you know, just mob mentality to the point where, yeah, it starts to feel really hopeless. Even as the guy is, you know, writing the letter to his family, as he's trying to just come up with certain argumentations for why he has the things that he has that they think makes him guilty. Like I think there's a certain equipment that he got from the rancher, and they think he must have stolen it after he was killed. But regardless, it feels, as the film goes on, you get deeper and deeper into this like hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite sort of tricks that it plays on you a little bit is that, again, it starts out in like two men riding into town and bar fights and, you know, talking about women. And then, this kid comes in and says that someone's been killed. And it's not something you wouldn't see in another Western or anything, but there is like an intensity to it, because like there's a vivid description of it. They say like he was point blank, like executed in the head, and, you know, like the bullet came through, and, you know, like they're talking about it very gruesomely. And the sheriff happens to be out of town, and he tapped a very violent deputy to be, you know, kind of his replacement, who, you know, then the sort of unhinged lynch mob who wants to immediately get revenge for this, you know, this short, dark Irishman who used to sing a lot, and he was a fine, God-fearing man. And they're using their memories of this guy to fuel a very intense bloodthirst that they clearly have. And I like Jason's point that the movie doesn't feel more righteous, but the characters still think that they are being righteous. And the movie just depicts that righteousness and that assumption of righteousness as something very ugly when it's not tied to, you know, some sort of standard of some kind, when it's just like, no, we don't need to follow all the rules. Let's just get all the boys together. We'll all get on horses. We'll all follow these guys, and we'll all string them up. Yep. Done day. And they even have a dude who comes in that I fucking love, the Major Tetley character, because he rides into town and he's the one who gives them the information that, you know, he actually saw three men riding up on the High Up Pass, and they were riding with cattle with Kincaid's brand. So he goes, these guys very clearly, you know, there's a dead guy, they have his cows. So, you know, let's go get those guys kind of deal. But I love that Henry Fonda's character here, Gil Carter, he's very interesting because unlike in 12 Angry Men, where once again, he's very sort of sensitive and he's very thoughtful. And, you know, in this, he's a little bit rougher. He's not necessarily like a bad person or anything. He's someone who knows what he's doing or what's happening is wrong. And he definitely speaks up more than other characters do. But unlike juror number 8, who like takes control of the room and, you know, actually starts, you know, weaponizing discussion and weaponizing psychology and doing all of these things, Gil Carter feels completely, you know, powerless against this force that is forming. And he does a couple things. Like he goes to the judge and he says, look, we got to tell these guys to bring him back, give him a trial, come to the judge, do these things. But, you know, the sort of the intensity of the collective overpowering, I think, is really palpably felt, especially in these early goings on. And then it takes on a whole new quality where up until the point where they finally leave town and they ride out as a posse and everything, you know, everything has been not dissimilar from a Western drama that you've seen before, but then it switches. And those like dark scenes where they're riding through the mountain pass and, you know, like the map paintings behind them and the way the darkness envelopes them. And even like the scary moment where they see a horse carriage like riding by them, and they all just start like shooting at it and getting into a fight with it, even though it was like very clearly, you know, just like a normal cart riding by. Like, again, these sort of like mundane domestic things now have violence to them because of this state of mind that they're in. But the sets are what blow me away. This is once again This is one of the largest sets ever constructed at Fox Studios. It was 26,000 square feet using tons of reused materials and sets from previous films. And this whole thing was built. It's incredible. And it almost looks like a gothic horror set. Like I thought a little bit about like the early scenes from Edgar G. Ulmer's The Black Cat, when they're like riding and it's like thundery and they're heading towards the castle and stuff. Like that's what this stuff kind of looks like. And I think it totally takes on a different vibe when it switches.
I also thought of, oddly enough, like that crossroads section in Faust, when it's like all of those really skinny trees that just kind of have these like creepy branches. Because they have that one shot. I think it's might be my favorite shot in the whole movie, where it's right when they're discussing like splitting up to go find the group of people, and they are under this tree, and it's this big wide shot, and it's just very like dead looking black tree, and they all separate and go away from it, but it just feels it feels right out of a horror movie. It really does. And I just also like the idea of like the tree overlooming them that leads to the images we'll get to later when we deal with the hanging and all of that as well. So, really, really cool imagery.
Yeah, really, really fatalistic imagery like that, including one of my favorite examples is how many, on rewatches, you'll definitely see it, but there are so many shots that I didn't even realize until the second and third time I watched that, like, the nooses can be seen hanging in the background off the tree for like the majority of the film. It's fucking crazy. Meanwhile, it drops a lot of music and it scores a lot of it to sounds of just like horses and leather straps and hoof steps and the whiskey bottles swishing and like the fire and the lamps and everything. Like the long, unbearable existential weight is, you know, what is the focus of this film while you're sitting there. And I mean, as Jayson was putting it, like the grim anticipation of what is going to come, because, you know, you are watching this thing that, you know, the machine has already been churning. Like the train wheels can't be stopped on this thing right from the beginning of the film. And it's just really painful to watch these characters very miserably try to resist it. And everything they try to do just doesn't work for them. It's hard to watch sometimes. Yeah,
I like the way, just speaking on the music, like the way that they open it up with a very classical kind of orchestral, big strings and big band kind of vibe. And they end with that as well. But you're right. Like in the middle, there's almost nothing. Maybe just when they're riding to the destination and have all those desert shots, there might be something. But a lot of it is just this, like I think he's an older religious man that goes along with them, and he's also trying to make it so that they have a trial, and he does a lot of just like singing old hymns to them, and which creates a very kind of, you know, it's creepy in a way, but he's trying to calm them, I guess, through religion and belief. So, but it still just adds to this like death is coming kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too. What's really interesting is they find the people that they think that they're looking for in the middle, right? And then there's still more of a debate going on afterwards, and then a set piece of the Mexican who's goes by Juan. A little later, but also I think too, as you talked about, there are less people, or there are more people in this one that are kind of like, should we really be doing this, but feel powerless against this mob? Whereas in the movie we watch in before, 12 Angry Men, there's Henry Fonda like trying to convince people, and so I think you have this idea of kind of, as you talk about, the noose of just let's just how that's going on. You know, and like I wonder, did y'all think that this was a little simplistic in its details, because this is really just about this? Did you think that this movie needed a little bit more, not discussion, but a little bit more details in the story?
I almost feel like the lack of details that the people have, like the group that are trying to hang these three people, the lack of details that they have make it more. So like, I think it fuels kind of their hastiness to do it. It's like they have a lack of information, but we've seen them kind of build this bloodthirst and almost this image of the people that shot their friend. And so I think that's where the drive is, because I think it would, more of a philosophical discussion like 12 Angry Men would definitely be interesting. But I like that it's more focused on just like their pure almost rage. It's kind of like their blinded rage at the fact that their friend has been killed and now they're going to kill these innocent people. But yeah, I definitely see your point.
I definitely, because I know what you mean. Like there is, in comparison to 12 Angry Men, like definitely a lot less speechifying and a lot less sort of like,
philosophical discussion.
Yeah, and like dignified calls for like, we need to do something right here.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. You're kind of caught. It's so quick and it's so minimalist that, I mean, before you know it, there's things that are kind of going on.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think also, what the difference is in this movie is it has less of a view of the characters and much more of a really intense, and this is what makes this movie fantastic to me and so impressive. It has such an intense viewpoint of just the situation in general as opposed to the humans. And it's more just like, I guess you could say it's more cynical in its view of the humans and much more intense in its view of the system. And it's it's brilliant.
Yeah, but I do like that these characters, for example, because many of them do try to form, some levels of resistance, but it kind of takes them a while to do it, and when they finally do it, it's not. Yeah, and when they finally do it, it's not enough, right? And that's what's interesting is that a lot of the detail that is put throughout, like in the early goings, like when they finally do get to the big, the campfire and they find the three men, and there's these beautiful images of like the campfire in the distance and them riding silently on the horses. And again, how much time is spent just like actually doing the mundane thing of like riding the horse up to the guys and then like, very unglamorously like threatening them with your guns, and it turning into like this little silly situation where they wake up and they're confused, and it's very, very.
The old man has that reaction where he opens up his covers, sees the gun at his head, and then goes okay, and goes back into the covers again.
Yeah.
So there is like some comedy a little bit, but it's more like it's really grounded, and it's more based in just like their human experience of how scary this would be.
Yeah, and I like how the elements of sort of like the character detail and some of the psychological detail is relegated to moments of quietness. Like one of the more sort of explored character dynamics, I think, is between, again, the Major Tetley character, who is a guy who is kind of leading the charge, and I love that they established that he is like a Nevada guy who like married a woman in Texas and lived there for like a week before getting chased out of Texas, and now he dressed like he's like a Confederate soldier now.
Great detail.
Yeah, it's a great detail, and he brings his son, and this relationship to me is one of the most important of the film, because he goes like, my son, he's a pussified a woman. He needs to learn how to kill a man. Like that's why the only reason he's brought his son with him. And there's so many great moments of his son being sensitive and actually being observational during these moments of quiet, where again, a lot of this is like the characters are eating or drinking or talking and whispering to each other, not having like a big public conversation, but like sharing their doubts amongst themselves, and everyone is part of this collective force that is about to do something, and we get kind of just individuals reacting to that from the inside picture of being within it, being scared of it, being horrified about where things are going. And there's like great moments where like the son will look at the three guys, and then he'll glance over at the horses and the nooses strung up on the trees, and he'll glance back at them, and he goes, these guys look like normal people. They look friendly enough. They're just eating at the campfire. He can't he can't cohere that image with the image, this really grim image that they're seeing just to the side, and he doesn't really understand. And that obviously that tension gets threaded out throughout the entire film until it gets to the end, which we'll talk about later. But like those elements, I think, are like, that's where the detail of this film is. It's not in characters speaking about their life experience like 12 Angry Men. It's in just like small psychological glances like that, and like the actual experience of what it would be like to be inside of a mob like this, where you are just completely powerless to its control.
I think it's really interesting to have when they do start to argue with each other and like kind of make their cases, it's really just the one guy, the general or major, that seems to be pushing and making the arguments, whereas everyone else is just kind of sitting down on the sidelines waiting for like their orders. It does seem a lot of the time that the group itself, even when they do the like divide the line in the sand and say like who wants to bring him to trial and who doesn't, it still feels like a lot of them are more pressured into it or just going along with whatever the group is doing rather than making any conscious decision themselves. Because there is, like you said, like with 12 Angry Men, you know, you get to hear every single person's argumentation. With this, it's really just like two major players that are trying to hang the people, and the rest are just doing what they're told.
Well, and they're letting their feelings inform that, right? Like they're being like, we were personally hurt. Someone who was friends with us was brutally murdered.
Right.
Now we need to latch those feelings onto something. This guy, he has a way of verbalizing that rage into something that makes sense to us. So we're going to follow that. We're going to go with that, even when it's confronted with like very basic things. Like when he goes like, you know, they are straight up going, okay, you guys have his cattle. What happened? And he's like, well, I bought him. And he's like, do you have a bill of sale? He's like, no. Well, he's like, well, that's just fine. He's just a quick ride over. Like, we'll go talk to my wife and kids. They'll back up my story. And, you know, like this kind of stuff. Yeah. And they're just being like, nah, that's not good enough. You know, we can't get a confession out of you, and we're not going to wait around for proof or evidence or witnesses. And we're just going to, you know, we need this catharsis, you know, like we need this. Yeah. So we're going to do it.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how much doubt there is. They even have a line where it's like, I think he talks to somebody that knew the rancher and was like, would you ever know if he would give somebody cattle without a bill of sale? And he's like, I hadn't known him to do that. But the guy's like, well, you've known him for 6 years. Do you think out of those 6 years he never once did it without a bill of sale? And it kind of relates to what he's doing with 12 Angry Men, which is like, we don't know, but there's still doubt here. So maybe we shouldn't hang these people from a tree.
Yeah, I mean, that's when Fonda comes forward and he's like, if you got any doubts, let's take him to the judge, which is like reasonable. He's not saying let's set him free. He's saying let's just take him to the judge and we'll talk about it with like a clear head. And I love that the major jumps in. He's like, this is only slightly any of your business, my friend. Remember that. And he's like, hanging is any man's business that's around.
Yeah. It's a good line.
Yeah.
It directly connects to the rest of society. I mean, if they allow this, which they will, it's not going to do anything good. It's only going to, you know, lack of faith in the system itself. It isn't justice. You're killing innocent people. Like there's so much to it that is obviously wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Major Ted Lee has always been my favorite. Is my favorite character in this, just because I think he's the one. He's very, outwardly the villain. And also, I think unlike Lee J. Cobb, he's not, given this speech that allows him some backstory and some humanity, even though he's still a villain. He's just straight up just like a bad dude. He's just like, I'm taking as you said, he's like, I'm taking my son. He's kind of a pussy. Like, it's just.
We're taking him to a hanging. Good Lord.
Yeah, I'm taking him to a hanging. So he's got to know.
Be a man.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So, he's got to know what men do. It's like Frank Conroy is really great in this.
Yeah. No, this is like for me, especially like when even just doing this back and forth stuff, like the fact that it is a little bit less talky and a little bit less graceful gives it just a little bit more power to me, because it's about characters who don't feel like they have something to say or feel like they know how to verbalize what it is that they're feeling. They're just feeling those things. And, at one point there's just palpable frustration. Like there's literally like the guy is like, why do you keep asking me all of these questions? You're not going to believe anything that I tell you. And his answer is there's truth and lies too, if you get enough of them. And like, there and at one point too, he's like begging just to be able to like write a letter. And
they almost don't let him do that.
God. Yeah, they almost don't let him do that. Like they have to get the old, once again, there's a kindly old man in here who has to like beg to like at least let the man write a letter to his family to explain what's going on. And God, the shot where they're all like laughing and cooking chicken and drinking and the camera pulls out to reveal the nooses blowing in the wind in the background. Like there's a funeral vibe to this whole thing, even in the human moments, like Jamie was talking about, like when the preacher is singing and he gives a little bit of backstory about how his brother was lynched, and they said, did they ever find out whether he did it or not? And they were like, we'll never know. Like that's the whole point of this process is you will actually never know that. It's to very cleanly do something horrible and not have to answer for it.
Right.
I felt like the idea of the noose was perfect too, by the way. Just like something so violent and such a backstory in American history being part of this, I felt was a huge aspect of it. I mean, and then you have a young, well-spoken man, Donald Martin, and then the Mexican Juan Martinez, and then an older man too. These are all three people, relatively speaking, that do not have are not allowed the rights, or not allowed the ability to defend themselves, or the ability to get the benefit of the doubt as the posse that is pursuing them, right? And I think it's an allegory for a lot of American history, and I felt like terror with seeing those nooses, and I was like, oh shit, that's what I'm talking about. Like this is the fucking movie.
Well, there's something so like with hanging, and with other executions that has this kind of thing too, but with hanging, it seems, especially in this time period, it was such a it was a public display, almost like they were showing it off, and I think just having those nooses hanging in the background, absolutely. So it's like just having them hanging in the background the whole time.
An idea of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an idea it's an idea of fear to show people like, this is make an example out of people, to get people afraid, right?
Right.
And a lot of what drives this movie is fear and revenge. So
100%.
Yeah, well, and also once again, it just doubles how sort of like undignified and pointless the whole thing is as well. The fact that like they a completely emotional reason that they are tying all of these events to suit that need in order to pull it off. And everyone is aware of that and unable to be like, have a proper response to that. He's like, what do you tell people? Like, they are very clearly not behaving logically. How do you reverse them or defeat them with logic? Which is what I think is something interesting, is that, this came out 15 years before 12 Angry Men, and it came out, a decade before High Noon, which is another similarly sort of like liberal McCarthy take down film. It's a good film. But it's very much based on this one lone principled man takes a stand and he fixes it in a way, is kind of the idea. And that's what we need. And what's so interesting about this film is that not only does it not quite give you that character, it gives you a couple who try, but they get absolutely defeated. And it happens in one of my favorite sequences in the film, because once again, we've seen tons of moments where like these characters are having conversations and you can constantly see the noose in the background. They just can't escape them. They eventually get down to a majority decision. They're like, let's vote on it. Let's do it. And they have the men slowly walking over to the other side of the camp to do it. And over the course, we see a couple of them go. We see the kind old man go. We see the preacher go. We see a lot of the characters we knew would be going. We see eventually Gil makes his move over because he's constantly been questioning this process since the very beginning, trying to get the judge involved and everything. And but he can't help but feel like he just doesn't have much power over it. I mean, they even say, will you read the letter? Like, if you read the letter, you will know this guy is innocent. And he's like, well, and he says that he won't read it. And he's like, well, will you not read it because you've made up your mind, or because everyone else has and you're afraid to stand up like a character in High Noon or 12 Angry Men would do? And so he does stand up, and also Letterly's son makes the walk over. And, so you're just silently observing, these men make the right human choice in this horrible waiting period. and there's this slow pan across how outnumbered they are. That is just so brutal, where you get the shot of the 7 of them on one side of the camp and you get like 20 some odd on the other. And I swear it's the slowest pan you've ever seen in your life, because he just wants you to be like, look how outnumbered they are.
Yeah. And they've almost now established, these 2 different sides. So those people that are the majority of people that are on the other side now look at these 7, I think it is, as kind of like enemies. They're not one with the group. They've almost been exposed, which does lead to something later on between the son and the major. And I also like that Jesus is right. I also like that, like you were saying, how there wasn't like any logic that was really going to twist their minds into thinking that these people were innocent, or at least that they deserve a trial. So I think I like when the old man starts to try to use the letter as like, well, it's like, I think in his brain he's saying, well, what if I can emotionally get to these people? What if I can say, like, maybe you will see some humanity in this guy if you just read what he says to his family. They don't, unfortunately. But I also do like that it gets a little complicated with the character of it's the main guy that they're arguing against that's going to be hanged.
Oh, the one played by Donald Martin, played by Dana Andrews, by the way, who's a really cool. Obviously, he's from the classic noir Laura, but also recently saw a print that Guillermo del Toro programmed of his Otto Preminger film called Fallen Angels. And cool. He is an excellent, like, sweaty, impulsive slimeball hustler in that film, which makes it really great casting in here, because he's not at all like that in his performance, but he kind of has that face to him. You know, like he has a look where you're like, yeah, this guy is very clearly a guy who would try and see how far $1 could take him, right, Yeah, but he's very well spoken, and he gives a lot of really great speeches and heartfelt, like sobs and begging, to not kill him, which just go completely unheard.
And I also like that he does a little bit of he's trying to tell the old guy, it's like, even though this might convince them, this letter that I just wrote was strictly for me and my family. And I really still like that they're clashing, because I believe that the old man should be doing what he's doing in some sense, because I think he even logically goes through it by saying, it's like, he can be mad at me all he wants, but what's really going to matter is if he gets to his family again. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially his reasoning for it. But I just really like that kind of that clash where it's like, this is for me and my family, not for these murderers.
Yeah. Like, that's obviously like a really great, like, personal moment of him asserting, he's like, this is like the last thing I have. This is the last bit of control or power I'm going to have over my life. Like, please respect that. Don't, like, show this and everyone's going to laugh at it, or, like, whatever they're going to do to it. Like, he's trying to assert a little bit of control in a situation where, once again, he is powerless. And also the film, like, to contrast that with the filmmaking building out just how, again, sort of sobering and miserable and fatalistic and unpitying the just entire experience is. One of my favorite moments is when they finally, they're building up to, they're going to do it. They're going to hang these guys. They've done the vote. It's time to hang them. There's this incredible pan over to the beautiful daylight rays coming down, which to him, again, it's this gorgeous image of the light coming through the tree, but also it's like daylight symbols. That was when we were going to wait till we're finally gonna hang him. And later it actually even is the same light that lights up his corpse when it's finally actually hanging there. And there's this amazing wide shot of all the horses going off, and you can see that the silhouettes of the three hanging corpses on the trees, like, that's the same light that's used to light that. So watching him look at that, knowing what it is that's coming, and the major forcing his son, who disagreed with the decision, to actually be the one to, like, actually hit the horse and pull the rope and, do all of these, horrible things, which because again, he's like, to do an unthinking, horrible act of violence like this, that's a male trait. And you got to learn it, man. And, they're giving them time to confess and pray, which is really hard to watch. And again, you're just sitting there, just forced to, like, in real time, just be like, yeah, they're going to do
hoping
things.
A hero comes. Yeah.
Just that's just never going to, like, it's so brutal and pointedly making you feel powerless as a viewer as these characters are going through this. And
then it just happens so fast. Like it's you all of this buildup, it feels like so long and grueling. And then it's just the signal, the horses go off, they're hung or hanged, they get shot. You see the silhouette and they ride off. Like it feels like there's so much buildup to such a quick death of innocent people, nonetheless. So yeah, it's just oh my God, it's brutal.
Yeah, like the horses taking off and the kid not hitting it right, so it doesn't actually like break his neck, and they have to like shoot the guy on the thing. But you don't see any of this too. It's done in this very intentionally composed image where you're totally focused on like the kid who's doing it, and then the horses, and then the guy who's shooting, and it pans just enough so that you don't actually ever see them. You just see them sort of like reflected on the land and everything, which gives it this kind of elemental quality to it too. It's really beautiful.
Have the guy singing the hymns too, so it kind of comes back. Like before, it was almost like something that was comforting, or at least trying to be, and then it turns into something that's just, you know, it's saying goodbye. I guess it's praying to God that they get to heaven or whatever they believe. So it's exactly, mournful, right? Yeah, like that whole sequence is just, and the build up to where he's just like, you know, like, what do you care about justice? You don't even care whether you've got the right man or not. All you know is that you've lost something and someone's got to be punished. You're a butcher, is essentially what he says to him.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's that part is very powerful and moving. It's like, it's really what the whole shit is about, right? It's really what it's I think too, like, man, we're living in times that, you know, not to make this about, that's the thing. When I watch movies, sometimes I keep, especially older ones, I keep thinking about how, wow, shit really don't be changed.
We're still wrestling with this stuff. It's a horrible thing to experience.
Yeah.
Problems are the same, man.
We're still wrestling with this idea of like, okay, people are in fear. And so what they're going to do is that they're going to overcompensate with that by kind of having this mob mentality and having this, true,
a scapegoat
and not scapegoat and not having this true sense of justice, and rather it's very unjust violence and unjust way of thinking. And so I mean, at the end, you know, what I love is Martin feeling sorry for the posse members, right? Because, you know, they're gonna have to live with, you know, what they did. And, you know, the sheriff as well, kind of, it leaves no doubt whether these people did this. I mean, we know this as a viewer, but it just has such a way of sinking you and being like, wow, okay, this is a matter of fact and what it is. Like, there is no interpretation other way other than, wow, what we just watched was a lynching and it was an unjust one.
I love personally that they don't even get like a chance to celebrate it at all. You know, like they don't get a moment to think that what they've done is right. It's immediately shot down because they do this hanging, they ride away, and the sheriff comes over being like, what's all this fucking gunfire that's going on over here of them executing the dudes on the hanged rope. And he goes, yeah, so it turns out Kincaid's not dead. He's in the hospital.
That was
he wasn't murdered. Yeah, and also we caught we think we caught the men who shot him. And they all go, like, just the looks on their faces. They all look around at each other, and he's just like, you know, we already hanged them.
Something, Sheriff.
Yeah. And he straight up goes like who did it? And they were like, all but seven. And the sheriff's like, God have mercy on you, because you will not be getting any from me, and not from this film either, because the following scene is the fucking major's son going up to him at the house and being like, I saw your face. It was the face of a depraved, murderous beast. Only two things ever meant anything to you: power and cruelty. And, you know, you can't feel pity, you can't feel guilt. You knew that they were innocent, but you wanted to see them hanged, and you wanted me to watch it. And, you know, I could have stopped you with a gun just like any other animal could have been stopped, but I couldn't do it because I'm a coward. And he's like, are you proud of me? Like, your son is a coward. And then you just hear him shoot himself in the next room.
So wild. Oh my god!
You know what that reminded me of was the warden shooting himself in Shawshank.
You're right.
Yeah, definitely.
It was so like oh yeah, my time is done.
We're doing it.
We're doing this shit. I've been skipping all consequences. I'm just gonna shoot myself. Yeah.
Again, it's so tormented and so filled with guilt as they all, again, complete silence. That shot of them all just sitting at the bar, looking down at their drinks, being like,
wow,
having to live with the thought of what we've done, and this is what the rest of their days are going to be like. Because it's where we opened, where they all sat around at the bar.
Yeah, and then we basically get like what it could essentially be a message from the dead, where Fonda starts to read off the letter that was going to go to his family and will eventually go to his family. And it is essentially just saying like, all of these men will have to live with the guilt. And at the very least, I know that I'm an innocent person. And it's just, just them sitting there listening to these words, knowing they did wrong and hearing it from the very person that they just hanged. Who was fighting for his life that entire time prior. Who's saying, I feel sorry for them because for this exact reason, they're going to have to sit there and think about this for the rest of their life. Whereas like my time on this earth is like done, you know, it's soon to be done very clearly. Yeah, it is just devastating. It's a really powerful moment. And then having Fonda then be the one to decide that he's going to go and deliver it to, the family, and he rides out of town in the exact same shot that he run in. Again, it's just this focus on the pure mundanity of him just riding out of town on another mission to go and deliver a letter. But it's just, again, to have filled it with so much like scary, sad atmosphere, over the course of the film, like that shot means something totally different. Right. Yeah. Cause I mean, even with the big, orchestral crescendo and everything that almost seems like it would be out of a more typical Western. You would feel like the heroes have saved the day and are like riding out of town now, and that's like it's so funny like how it tries to give you that shot, and it's just not the feeling of it at all. Defeated and heartbroken. Yeah, you're just way too defeated to even enjoy like a single aspect of it. Kind of. It's yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, which listeners of the show will know is my shit. Absolutely, it is. I like going to the absolute depths of depravity, and and to have something this bleak in 1943. Yeah, crazy. Kind of blows my mind, because like even with pre-code, you can at least make the argument that it was before the code. They could get away with it, but like I don't know how they got away with this one. Actually, even in the reviews, some of them were like really unhappy with it. One of the ones that I thought was incredible called the film depressing, unpleasant, and whoever is responsible for selecting such sordid material for the screen should be the one put on trial. Yeah. Oh my god. Who wrote I don't even remember. I just
Harrison's reports. I'm looking at it now. Harrison's reports.
Oh, okay.
Apparently it was kept on the shelf for months too, because Fox was like, I don't know how to market this thing. This is the most like depressing thing we've ever watched.
So what's really interesting is in '98 it got selected for the Library of Congress. So it took a while for this movie to become kind of like, oh shit, people appreciate it, people love it. Yeah. It also lost Best Picture to a notoriously kind of like. And Casablanca's great, but it's a notoriously like upbeat type of like everyone can get involved in this type of like movie, right? Even though the ending isn't necessarily like a happy one, quote unquote. It kind of sort of is like a little bit like it's like Rick and the captain are kind of boys now or whatever, and so it's a little bit of a different vibe than what happens here, and you kind of think about like. Oh, wow. Okay. Movies like this have been losing Oscars for so long.
Yeah, for sure. I personally think I do like this better than Casablanca. I do like Casablanca, obviously, but this, I think this hits me a lot harder.
It's better than Casablanca. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. We are deciding on this show right now. No one can disagree.
Objectively,
William
yes.
A. Wellman's The Oxbow Incident, better film than Casablanca. Tell all your friends, tell all your family members.
This is also apparently Clint Eastwood's favorite movie. Which
I was
going to
say,
It definitely. I mean, you can see he definitely channeled that anger and misery down the line with his
High Plains
Westerns.
Drifter.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah, for sure. So that's cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's Unforgiven's a totally different movie, but I can totally see Eastwood being really into this, right? Richard Jewell's is a movie about, essentially people believing this man did something that he definitely didn't do, and not even thinking that someone else even remotely did it until the very end, right? And so I think I can clearly see the influence that Eastwood had on it.
Yeah. No, same here. I think this is amazing. Yeah, obviously pivoting towards reductive rating round. For me, this is the 5. Nice. I am really, really impacted by this for a lot of the reasons that we've already said, like just how dark and harrowing of a depiction this is of mob justice and how it predates so many of our finest examples of this. Like, I'm still surprised at how early this is. Even the novel 1940, like, it was a really, really dark subject matter for the time that even predates McCarthyism itself. And
yeah, the only one I can really think of is like that we've seen anyway is M. Kind of does it.
Yes. There is a little bit of that mob quality there for sure.
But like this is one of the earliest, especially just for how bleak it is. So
yeah, and personally, the thing I love about it is how the didactic speechifying and, like, again, the characters calling for righteousness is, kept at a minimum so that it can develop this mood of, just horrifying, dour and bitter anticipation for what it is that's going to come, and how mundane and distressing that is. Like, again, so much of this movie is waiting and sitting around with these characters being like, can we do anything about this? Probably not. It's just going to keep going. Like, that's the feeling you get out of this. And I like that Fonda here, unlike in 12 Angry Men, it's cool to see, him at the center doing two completely different performances, because Gil is just so much more quiet and flawed and a little bit rougher and tougher. And he completely resigns himself to being powerless and just becoming this tormented witness, who eventually does become a culpable bystander and feels awful about it. And
whereas Juror 8 just feels like, completely kind of
humanity has been restored.
Yeah, and he feels like a need to keep fighting, whereas Gil's here seems a little more passive. 100%.
Yeah,
and that's what's so interesting is that, like, what might be read as simple moralizing on the page here is just, it's given a real mundane structure to it, and it's given a real sense of like unbearable waiting and pain to it. And I think a real depiction of what it would feel like to be stuck inside of one of these mobs and being swept up in one and not being able to do anything about it. And, again, this sort of fatalistic machine that's impossible to stop, like the wheels on a train kind of deal. It's like, it's not going to happen. So, and again, it's layered with so much intensely fatalistic images, all of those nooses hanging in the background, all of those light rays, all of the shots of the trees, again, just so beautiful and so brutal and intentionally both anticlimactic and like a horror story. Yeah. And this is a Western from 1943. So, like, it's really crazy to me that this exists.
There's no romanticization in this at all. None.
Yeah,
None.
Good word.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it really breaks you down. By the end of the movie, I was like, God damn, I don't know how I can start my day. Like, it's just
don't have much faith anymore.
Dude, that's so funny. That actually is what the New York Times review, which was one of the few positive reviews in 43, was the Expo incident is not a picture.
Bosley's never wrong.
Yeah, he was like, not a picture that will brighten or cheer your day up, but it is one for which the sheer stark drama is currently hard to beat. But it's very funny that it's the same wording. He was just like, it's a day ruiner.
My day up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, Bosey's never wrong, man. That's a guy right there. No, it's high for me. I mean, in different ways in 12 Angry Men, but definitely still a 5 for me. I'm not sure if sometimes I get 5s and like it's hard for me to rewatch. there's still fives.
Right.
This might be one of them. I don't know, but it does have a quick runtime, so maybe I definitely will check it out. But
Yeah.
man, talk about a mundane, cold, and depressing but powerful masterpiece. You got this one right here. Yeah.
Hell yeah, for you, Jamie.
Yeah, I feel I was gonna give the high 4, but I actually might go with the 5. Because I really can't think of anything that I really dislike about this. Even the kind of hangups, the very small hangups that I have of 12 Angry Men, with some of its some of the argumentation can be a little bit like far-fetched every once in a while, I find. But with this, it's just more focused on just their kind of like bloodthirsty drive to kill these people and enact revenge. I think that kind of helps it for me a little bit. Just the focus purely on the mob mentality and this very innocent, seems sweet man trying his best to prove his innocence, but with like no evidence on his side, basically. Just kind of like trying to show his humanity and that he isn't capable of doing this kind of murder.
Yeah, and I do love that there's this element too where, again, he's like, well, we could just ride like 5 minutes and go get some evidence. And they're always like, no. Like, this needs to be a now. Like,
That's the thing.
there's this impatient hostility and hysteria that this gets you swept up into a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, because there are multiple times where the guy's like, I'm fully okay with actually going on trial. It's not like he is explaining his innocence, obviously, because he is an innocent person, but he's also saying, I'm fully willing to go through the system, but you're not even allowing me to do that. So I don't know what to tell you here. And then it's just very, very bleak, but deservingly so. I really like the kind of horror-esque imageries, like the way they use the nature and the really decrepit, like dead trees and all of that. I think it's like especially sad. They really do a lot of accent on the sad, like the old man that's basically just like begging for his life before they hang him and saying, I don't want to die.
Oh God.
I don't want to die. And he's not really.
It's like the score for the scene for a little while is just hearing this man beg for his life.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's also someone that doesn't seem to be fully aware of what's happening, besides just that he's about to die. So there's a lot of sadness in that too. And yeah, it's incredibly bleak. It will not be a day brightener. But it is really great. And just to have this be something from 1943, I think is really wild. And again, love that it opens and closes as like a classical Western, but everything in the middle is just incredibly not that, at least what I've seen in your typical 40s Western movies. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with the 5.
Amazing. Yeah, no, like it is a very intentional visual like reference counterpoint to be like, this could have been a normal Western story. Yeah. But no, this is in fact, even in comparison to Angry Men, this is like a very hushed and soft and kind of mature thing that's not even particularly, it's not even as like dynamically directed like Angry Men is, where it's constantly making these huge dramatic gestures, but somehow it's still just filled with so much impending doom to it. It's a really insane balancing act that Wellman pulls off. So I think we need to talk about some more of his stuff at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the final thing I'll say is I just I really, and we already said it, but I wanted to say it again. I really love that they spend no time with like their satisfaction after the hanging. It just, they're delivered the truth right away. And, there's no moment of like catharsis for them or anything. And that's deserved. So I do like that. At least we have that. It kind of, it's not a brightener really, but there's at least some, like,
they definitely get punished.
Yeah, there's some retribution. Yeah, something. So anyway.
Yeah. There's, if the people aren't going to jail, you get, probably not, but you get this idea of, wow, okay, these people will never be the same again. This guy just shot himself in his, what I'm saying? Let's fucking go.
Yeah. Dude, that gunshot sound, even, it just, I almost forgot about it on my second watch.
I was shocked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
So yeah. Well, awesome. I think that'll wrap it up for this week. That was 12 Angry Men 1957 and the Oxbow incident from 1943. Thanks so much, Jayson, for joining us and talking about these films with us. I was very excited that you were so passionate and wanted to talk about 12 Angry Men. It forced me to rewatch it because I honestly don't think I had even watched it since like civics class, high school. So I was, and it holds up. It's a great film.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And if what's going on in Jayson World? You got anything to plug while you're here? Any new pieces? Anything coming up?
I'm always working. I got something coming on French Montana soon. I got something coming up tomorrow on RSK Nephew. I did a concert review for his performance. So I got a bunch of stuff coming up. Thank you for letting me come through and talk about these movies. I mean, I love the movies, man. Like one of those. I mean, we all do it. Just one of those. I'm grateful that I can be a part of a movie community like this, and I'm just grateful that I've been introduced to them in my life more, and they make me think about myself more. And they're just a fascinating piece of art, a piece of medium. And so, 12 Angry Men and Oxbow Incident, they're both really great. And to your point, Jamie, like a movie in 1942 being this bleak, we love it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
I remember I felt similar when I first watched Sunset Boulevard because I was like, oh damn.
For sure.
Like, you know what I mean? That ending too was like really, and I watched that when I was a kid too, and that movie was really huge for me. So we love bleak endings. Yeah, we do love bleak endings. So
yeah,
appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, actually, real quick, it kind of reminded me of something. When they do that split in the sand, I thought it was going to be like the original version of when they, that heroic moment of like everyone comes on the right side of the line and they say, no, we're not going to hang them. And I just love that the movie's like, no, actually, we're going to give you about 7. And then, 35 other people are going to still want the hanging.
Here's the slowest, like 2-minute long pan across every single person saying, yeah, no, you're wrong. We're going to kill these guys. Yeah, it's
really subverted my expectation of what was going to come from this era and that idea, because I just, the idea of someone, the mob going over to the right side is very it's been done a bunch of times, and I thought this might be the original, and it's the opposite, so that was cool too.
Yeah, and Sunset Boulevard is a good point, Jason, and people should look forward to it because we're finally going to be talking about it in November sometime this year, so everyone can It's coming up. Ooh. Sunset Boulevard. It's getting covered. I'm not going to spoil the double feature, but I like the second film just as much as Sunset Boulevard. So we are going to have a crazy bleak time.
Y'all have some really great episodes where you talk about features that are both equally similar in stature and quality and just like fame. You know what I mean? Like Casino Goodfellas, you guys did one time. There was, I think, In a Lonely Place. You did In a Lonely Place with something too as well.
We haven't done In a Lonely Place yet, actually, but now it's been spoiled. That's the double feature.
Oh, there you go.
We're going to do In a Lonely Place and Sunset Boulevard at some point.
That was, and if it did that, I felt was like, oh wow, these two movies are very in the same sense.
Hell yeah! Well, thanks, man. Yeah, it was no problem. I didn't have to jump in and say it. I just am really excited about that. I've literally had that double feature planned out doing because it's such a dark Hollywood specific thing because like they're both screenwriters in both of those films. And man, I can't wait to do Humphrey Bogart, Billy Wilder. What's that, sorry?
Same year too, right?
You know what? It might be the same year. You might be right on that.
I think it's the same year. Yeah. Same
Wild
year.
Then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be a crazy episode later in the year. Everyone can definitely look forward to that. But yeah, everyone also go follow Jayson on Twitter. Go keep track of his writing. Follow him on Letterboxd. He's always watching films. Always giving me recommendations and taking recommendations. We are going to be, for our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time where we are going to be continuing the Western track. Off of Oxbow Incident, we're going to go spaghetti Western mode because we haven't talked about a spaghetti Western in a little while, I realized. So we're going to do one of the more sort of like underrated names, in my opinion, of spaghetti Westerns. We're going to talk about the Sergio that gets talked about a little bit less than Leone, a little bit less than Corbucci. We're going to talk about Sergio Salima, who directed The Big Gun Down with Lee Van Cleef and Face to Face, and I think are both incredible, very, very politically minded spaghetti westerns. The Big Gun Down actually even co-written by the guy who wrote Battle of Algiers. So it's like a very, very intense examination of like people realizing that they, by being a lawman, that they are an extension of something very evil and systemic in a way. So we're going to talk about those two films. And then in 2 weeks' time, we have a special returning guest who did an episode that almost kind of pairs with Jason's episode. We have Eddie Averill coming back from the Extended Clip podcast, where he is going to be, no joke, he's going to be doing Once Upon a Time in the West, starring Henry Fonda, the spaghetti western
Nice.
by Sergio Leone, and My Darling Clementine, starring Henry Fonda, directed by John Ford. So we're going to be talking Henry Fonda 4 movies in a row.
It works out.
I mean, Fonda was great. I mean, you said it earlier, this quality of like, not really an action star, not really a tough guy, but someone with character that you can still trust. And like, you see that in a lot of stars now. Denzel has that. Denzel's a little bit more action based than I think Henry Fonda is, but Denzel also has that. And yeah. I mean, you know, real star, real. I mean, Redford had that as well. I mean, real famous star. It's a classic Hollywood actor.
Hell yeah! No, yeah, we're very excited to keep on the Fonda train. But yeah, that being said, I think that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.